Hello and welcome to Miniatures Rundown. I'm Joshua.
I'm Mitchell.
And today we're talking about brutes and hangers-on. Hangers-ons? Hanger-ons? I always get this confused.
Hangers-ons.
I was going to say non-combatants, but that's not really true.
It's not true either.
Especially in the case of brutes. So, for those unfamiliar, in Necromunda, a hanger-on, or a brute, is somebody you can add to your gang who is not a ganger, champion, specialist, or juvie, or prospect, or... Basically, they're part of your gang, but they're just kind of someone who hangs out with you and not really part of your gang.
Yeah, they're hangers-on.
Yes. And it ranges between hangers-on, who are non-combat specialized.
Yeah.
Most of, and not most, all of them do have combat stats because they can get drawn into combat. But hangers-on, with the exception of one of them, is not really meant to be fighting. In fact, if they're fighting, there's a problem.
Usually, yeah.
Brutes are the opposite. A brute is somebody you can add to your gang whose job is to beat something up.
They're basically extra fighters without having to take up fighter slots.
Correct. Instead, they take up their own slot. Now, hangers-on and brutes are both use the same system for determining when you can take them and how you can take them. And that system is based on your reputation. I remember we talked about in the very first episode where we talked about reputation doesn't have a lot of effect until it does. This is when it does.
Yes.
Because how much reputation you have says how many hangers-ons and brutes you can take in your gang.
The more word of mouth, the more popular your gang is, the more people will likely join you.
Exactly. So if as long as you, it's basically every 5.
Essentially.
Reputation 1 to 4, you can have one hanger-on or brute.
Yeah.
They take the same slots. That's important. 5 to 9 is 2, 10 to 14 is 3, 15 to 19 is 4, and 20 plus is 5.
The max you can never have is 5.
Right. If you lose that reputation, though, you have to get rid of him, and you don't get your money back.
No, they just leave.
Obviously, you could change this with your arbitrator or whatever if you wanted to have infinite hanger-on and brutes. But as far as when you can add them, it's just like adding a new fighter to your gang.
Yep.
Now, keep in mind that as of the most recent edition of Necromunda, you do start with 1 reputation in most campaigns.
Yeah. And as far as I'm aware, there's not one where you can go below 1.
Correct. That means you can start with a hanger-on or a brute at gang creation. Some campaigns will say you can't.
Yeah.
But
all
most,
campaign dependent.
Yeah.
Arbitrator dependent.
You can. So you can start with a hanger-on or a brute. Now, we talked about hangers-on and brutes have one key difference, and that is their combat viability.
Sure.
Hangers-on don't like to be in combat. There's only way they can get into combat, with the exception of the named ones. By the way, we're not talking about dramatis personae today.
Yeah, that's a whole different
Dramatis personae are basically named bounty hunters, hanger-ons, and I think in one case a brute.
Yeah.
Them aside, most hangers-on don't actually like to be part of combat. For them to be part of combat, number 1, you have to have home turf advantage. Home turf advantage is something granted to the defender, and only on some missions.
Not every mission.
It is specified in the mission itself whether you have home turf advantage.
Right.
You have to have home turf advantage, and then for each hanger-on, you roll a d6. On a 1 to a 3, oops, they're in combat, and they are part of your. They must be included as part of your starting crew.
They basically didn't leave fast enough before the fight started.
They got caught off guard. Now they are. This is the kind of nice thing. They are included in addition.
That is true.
To your starting crew.
That being said, most of them are not combat viable.
Most of them are bad.
Yeah.
Most of them are very bad in combat. I'm talking weapon skill, ballistic skill 5 or 6.
A pistol, maybe a knife.
Maybe a knife. There are a few exceptions to that.
There are.
The ammo jack, one of the most popular hangers-on for a good reason, can be equipped with a bolter or a combat shotgun.
Both
has
very
a
good.
4-up ballistic skill and mesh armor, and will, especially in the early game, absolutely kick some butt.
They will.
There's a few others that aren't terrible. One of the underhide traders, the arms trader, actually has a decent gun and decent ballistic skill. Generally, you don't want your hangers-on to be in combat.
Right.
Brutes, on the other hand, brutes are treated just like all of your other gang members, which means you can always bring them.
Yep.
They are if you roll randomly, you include your brutes when you roll. If you have a choice, you can include your brutes. And that's it.
Yeah.
Like, it's super simple. The other nice thing about brutes is that, like your gangers, they can get XP and advancements.
Which is awesome.
The one downside to them is that most brutes, with a few exceptions, most brutes do specify that you cannot change their equipment after purchasing.
Yeah, that's real dumb, but that's what it says.
And that's a big problem because as we talk about some of the brutes, we'll talk about some of the upgrades they have, and some of them are 100 credit upgrades.
Yeah, it's like 200 credit guy, 90 credit upgrades, so...
And that means that if you want the good stuff, you have to front load that cost.
Yeah, that's a little rough.
Which can be really rough. But they do get XP, and
Yeah.
they can get advancements, and they all have access to their own skill tree. So they get advancements in the way a specialist does.
Yep.
Hangers-on, on the other hand, never get XP, cannot get advancements, and if a hanger-on ever gets anything that would change their fighter card,
Right.
which means any kind of injury that would give them -1 ballistic skill or whatever, they leave.
Yep.
They basically decide that this is not safe, not worth it, and they peace out.
It's too risky.
And you do not get your money back. There are other ways for others to leave. Some hangers-on can die as part of their mechanics.
Yep.
The Orlok prize fighter, for example, you roll randomly to get a certain amount of money. If you roll double ones, he just gets killed in a fight.
The Delok Whisper Merchant
Yep.
leaves after so many uses.
Unless you pay him up after a certain amount.
He leaves, but you have to buy another one.
Right. So they can leave.
Yep.
Additionally, most brutes and hangers-ons will also specify how many you can have in a gang.
Right.
So, for example, the ubiquitous ammo jack, you can only have 3 of them in a gang, ever.
Yeah.
Mini hangers-on, you can only ever have 1 of. Most of them that you can have more than 1 of do have stacking effects.
Right. Like, for example, the ammo jack has an ability that lets you reroll ammo checks, and the reroll gets better the more you have.
If you have 1 ammo jack, you can reroll all 1s. If you have 2, you can reroll 1s and 2s. You probably see where this is going.
Yeah.
So it maxes out at 3, where you can reroll all 1, 2, and 3s on an ammo check, which is really good.
It is.
And that's it for hangers-on and brutes. We're going to talk in our next couple videos about the specifics of which ones you may or may not want to bring.
There's some strong opinions.
There are some strong opinions on brutes and hangers-on. Some hangers-on are considered to be almost mandatory for certain gangs.
Yeah.
Some brutes are considered so bad as to never be worth it.
Yep.
But we'll see you when we talk about those videos. I know this was short, but let us know below if you thought this was helpful. Helps us understand what we need to do more of. Until then.
Bye-bye.